a young 16-year-old boy, an altar boy of the church. There were curfews going on, and they had tanks all around the city circling them. And he was out with his 70-year-old cousin, I think it was, and they were just kicking a soccer ball. He was shot dead by a sniper.
You see these videos of Christians, priests with crucifixes around their necks getting spit on in Jerusalem. Are those real?
Yes.
Do you know anyone who's been spit on? Any Christians who've been spit on?
Me.
You've been spit on?
Of course, yeah.
What do you mean, of course? That's disgusting.
Yeah, well, but that's the least of it.
It's the most intense, traumatic experience I don't think any physician can understand. I would say take the most experienced trauma surgeon, in Baltimore, which is like one of the biggest trauma centers in America, and put him in Gaza, and it's like child's plague compared to what's going on in Gaza. You're talking about like an influx of like 400 patients in like 4 hours with 30 casualties on arrival, 30 headshots on arrival, 30 critical mass shots on arrival, and then like everything in between, women, children, elderly, men, young boys. And it's just like, how the heck do you triage all this? And that was every day, man.
The problem with Israel and Palestine is not Muslim versus Jew. It's the occupation, stupid. They do not want any Palestinians there. So the majority of Christians in Israel and Palestine are Palestinian. So they have to leave too.
This is a very different story from the one that we're told in the American media, that Christians are imperiled by Muslims in the Middle East.
They are not imperiled by Muslim in Palestine. That is an absolute fact. A young 16-year-old boy, an altar boy of the church, there were curfews going on, and they had tanks all around the city circling them. And he was out with his 70-year-old cousin, I think it was, and they were just kicking a soccer ball. He was shot dead by a sniper.
Why do American Christian churches send money to a government that does this to Christians?
Well, I think the ones that send money that support the settlements are obviously the Christian Zionists.
Tucker Carlson is getting quite a bit of backlash from some in the United States for interviewing Mother Agapia Stephanopoulos on his podcast to discuss what it's like to be a Christian living in a Palestinian territory in an apartheid state. Now, she moved to the Holy Land back in 1996. Think Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, Jacob's Well, and Jericho. These are areas that have religious significance for the Christians. And she claims, that it's been difficult not only for Palestinian Muslims, but also for Christians. So with that in mind, here's a quick rundown of some of what she had cited during this conversation.
Raids take place all the time, and it's very difficult. But what happened the other day was that a Christian-run factory. In Nablus, there's about 600 families, around 600 Christians, a number of churches, and Jacob's Well, which is a very important site to us. We always go there on a pilgrimage when we can. And their factory, no warning, no permit. First, on June 26th, I believe, the Israeli army came in and confiscated some of the factory equipment. And then 2 weeks later, they came and blew up a big portion of the factory. I have a young man that we just helped come to America a year and a half ago who lives north of Hebron, a Christian, and his family, he went to school a half hour north in Shepherd's Field. We wanted to bring him to America because he was at that age where you look the wrong way at a soldier and it's possibility of getting shot. He's Christian, but he could be Muslim. It doesn't, the point is that this is what happens to them. A young 16-year-old boy, an altar boy of the church, there were curfews going on, and they had tanks all around the city circling them. And he was out with his 70-year-old cousin, I think it was, and they were just kicking a soccer ball. He was shot dead by a sniper, 16-year-old Johnny Talgia.
You remember his name?
Of course. And also there was another, Christine Saada. Her father was the principal of the Orthodox school in Bet Sahur, Shepherd's Field.
So I thought this interview was an important one because it kind of gives you a perspective that oftentimes isn't covered in US media at all. Oftentimes when you think about, ongoing conflicts in that part of the world, you think of, Israel constantly being attacked by these jihadists. Oh, it's, the Muslims who are the big problem. They're a real threat to their security and their safety. And the perspective that she provides as someone who actually lives there and experiences what it's like to live there every day, I think it's valuable because it shows that it's not just about, Muslims versus Israelis. The way that Christians are treated in the occupied West Bank, for instance, is pretty brutal. And so it shows you that this goes beyond, this conflict with Palestinian Muslims. This is really about power. This is really about land. This is about pushing anyone that doesn't identify as, a Jewish Israeli out of Israel and expand Israel further. Later in the interview, they get into the Greater Israel Project, and she details it really, really well. We didn't clip that out because there were so many elements of this interview that I wanted to talk about instead. But again, this perspective is super important if you ask me. And more importantly, the backlash that Tucker Carlson is getting right now for just interviewing her at all, I think is telling.
So I want to get to that backlash in a sec because you know a lot more about it than I do. Just a couple of quick things here. First of all, Israel is trying to take Gaza and West Bank, let alone southern Lebanon and Western Syria. That is all part of Greater Israel. So if you don't know that they're trying to take that, you might be constantly surprised. Like, well, I don't get it. How come they don't just make the deal that Hamas is saying they'll do a deal right now, return 20 hostages? All Israel has to do is withdraw even partly from Gaza, but they won't. They won't ever do anything to get those hostages back. And you were wondering, why did you have to slaughter 61,000 people, etc.? And the reason is because they're trying to take the land for Greater Israel. Today, Netanyahu said, yes, that he's super proud that he is trying to reconstitute Greater Israel. I mean, he's just flat out saying it.
Yeah, he's saying it out loud.
He's saying it out loud incontrovertibly, right? And did you guys hear that? Maybe if you're following an online show, you might have heard that. But mainstream media is an Israel protection racket. And so when they drive out people from Gaza and West Bank, do they go, oh, the Christians, you can stay, but Muslims are gonna kill you? No, they drive out both the Christians and the Muslims. And so now there's so much to address there, but first, before we do anything else, Anna, I lived in a majority Muslim country.
Right.
I lived in Turkey until I was 8 years old. I still have a lot of family there, right? And so I know growing up what it was like. And you have to understand something, if you grew up in America, you have been exposed to brainwashing by mainstream media, massive, massive propaganda against Muslims. And I didn't know why until recently, to be honest with you. And now I know it was propaganda from Israel to get Americans to hate all Muslims, so that when Israel kills them and takes their land, you were gonna say, well, I mean, what are you gonna do? The Muslims are the terrorists, not the Israelis, but the victims are the terrorists. It has been an overwhelming propaganda campaign to smear Muslims in this country. So, having lived in a Muslim country, is it anything like our mainstream press has been talking about? Or where Muslims are hunting Christians or Jews? Not remotely. It's a giant, massive lie. So in Turkey, I grew up with Christian friends. We had Armenian friends in Istanbul. I grew up with Jewish friends. Jewish businessmen helped my dad tremendously, right? There was once an attack on a synagogue in Istanbul, and the whole country was enraged because that is not what modern day Turkey stands for, and we protect our neighbors, Christians, Jews, etc. But if you turn on TV or any mainstream media in America, all you'll hear is, oh, Muslims want to kill everyone, Muslims are evil.
Right.
Meanwhile, look away as Israel takes more and more of their land.
So I'm gonna get to a clip where she talks about the relationship between Christians and Muslims in just a minute. But before I do, they also delved into something that you may have seen, some videos of online. Let me see, I wanna make sure I go to the right video here.
As you're doing that, Anna, can I just say one other thing? As we look, there's 3 shows that have, in my opinion, helped the Palestinians the most in the middle of this genocide. One is on the right, one's on the left, and one's in the middle, is a libertarian. Libertarian's obvious, Dave Smith. Part of the problem is the name of his podcast. He's been absolutely brilliant on this, right? And honestly, us here at the Young Turks, we have fought as hard as we possibly can from the left. But Tucker Carlson from the right has helped more than anyone I could imagine in any part of the political spectrum.
I have to say, I mean, look, I've been learning a lot from, I pick and choose which episodes I listen to. This one, I wasn't really sure if I was gonna find all that fascinating, I'm so happy that I gave it a shot and I couldn't stop listening. Like I thought it was so interesting. I learned a lot because you'd never hear about the Christian perspective coming out of Israel at all, ever, right?
It's buried.
It is buried. And by the way, she talks about that all the time. She feels that one of the biggest issues in, this emergence of so-called Judeo-Christian values or Christian Zionism is that a lot of Christians in the United States who are happy to support Israel, happy to send their tax dollars and resources over to Israel, they don't know what's really going on the ground as it pertains to Christians and how they've been treated. And in fact, in this next video, she talks a little bit about some of those videos you may have seen online. Some of them go viral. I had seen the first one, or the first time I had seen one was this year, and I was like horrified by it. But it's, Christians literally being spit at. So take a look.
You see these videos of Christians, priests with crucifixes around their necks getting spit on in Jerusalem. Are those real?
Yes, and I mean that's happened before. Even from the first days that I was there, there'd be occasionally something like that, and occasionally there were graffiti put on walls and sprayed on. Jesus a monkey. 2013, we got a church. Yeah, that was right in Tabka, where the multiplication of the loaves and the fish, a Catholic community, graffiti there talking about getting rid of the idols or something like that, some sort of Old Testament statement, and burning a statue of the Virgin Mary in parts of the monastery there.
Do you know anyone who's been spit on? Any Christians who've been spit on?
Me.
You've been spit on?
Of course, yeah.
What do you mean, of course? That's disgusting.
Yeah, well. But that's the least of it.
So she says that's the least of it. And as she details other experiences, you get a sense of why she feels that way. So, back in 2002, the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem in the West Bank was essentially victimized by an Israeli siege. So that siege went on from April 2nd, 2002, and it lasted over a month through May 10th of 2002. Israel called the siege Operation Defensive Shield, and around 200 Palestinians actually took refuge in that church. Now, she's going to describe what that whole experience was like. Take a look.
There was a siege at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, birthplace of Jesus. Yeah. Maybe 2002. I remember.
Oh yes, I was there. Yeah. I had. That's where I became especially close to the Palestinian Christian community. It wasn't just a siege on the church itself. What they claimed was that there were some fighters that were in the church, which actually that's a Christian tradition, for people to take refuge in a church. But the Israelis used that as a way to, they besieged the church. People couldn't get food and medicines. After a while, it became, I would get calls and saying, my neighbor has epilepsy and we cannot get a new medication for her. Can you find a way to get something in, through a care organization into us? And finally, when the siege ended during that time, I remember a doctor telling me describing how someone had been shot in his house. And he was bleeding to death. And he was calling the doctor, what do I do? What can I do? And the doctor literally heard him just bleed to death during that because no ambulance, nothing was allowed. Everything was strewn with garbage all over the streets, the bullet holes. What Israel likes to do is destroy. Not only do they control the place, but they almost take glee.
There were people shot inside the Church of the Nativity.
Yeah, the bell ringer there was shot dead. Yeah, and I know most
was he
there.
Christian?
Of course, yeah.
So that was the moment.
And Christians were shot outside the church.
So, this is, again, a part of the story that you don't hear about in the United States. And when you hear these details and you put those details up against the kind of statements that you'll hear from, let's say, Senator Ted Cruz about the importance as a Christian of defending anything and everything Israel does, you just kind of get a better glimpse at just how much, the Israel lobby has an impact on our politicians. So much so that self-described Christians, individuals who consider themselves very devout, are literally supporting a project that is persecuting Christians on the ground.
Yeah.
That's what a Jewish state would be, right? I mean, they want an ethno-state, and they're proud of it. They say it. In the Likud charter, they love to talk about Hamas's charter, but why don't we talk about the Likud charter for a minute? Because if you find from the river to the sea offensive, well, it's been in the Likud charter. It's what Benjamin Netanyahu believes in. It's what he preaches about. It's what he says his objective is out loud. as Jake mentioned earlier. So
yeah, and I have the quote from today too. But in the case of the Palestinians, for the militant group Hamas and others, they have it on their charter, but that's theoretical. Israel has nukes, they have Iron Dome. There's no way in the world that they could threaten the existence of Israel. Does Hamas going to go from stones? They don't even have missiles left now, they're down to stones. Stones to nukes, and they're gonna out-nuke Israel and get past Iron Dome? There is no threat to Israel's existence. That is a giant fabrication. That is total propaganda. It might have happened, it might have been true in 48, and you could imagine maybe 67, 73, etc., without getting into who was right or wrong in those wars. But in the year 2025, there is a 0% chance that Israel is going to get wiped out, let alone by Hamas that has it literally down to a slingshot, okay? So this is all propaganda. And so, and if you say, hey, wait now, this doesn't sound right. What do you mean it's propaganda? That's maybe you've been taught that sounds conspiratorial or something. Now let me ask you something, guys, in furtherance of that idea. So if Iran had shot Christian kids over and over again, and the Christian nuns, etc., were being spat upon and their churches bombed in Iran, do you think you would have heard about it? And do you think that half the politicians or 98% of the politicians and 200% of our media would have been enraged about it? How dare these dirty Muslims spit on a Christian and murder Christian kids? We have to invade. We have to attack them. They're the worst of the worst. Israel does it. Shh. So if it's not propaganda, what is it? And I ask that as a genuine question because the politicians I get, they're bought, period. We see the money that they get. It's not, the only people who don't understand that are guys pretending not to understand it in mainstream media. Oh, what is the effect of millions of dollars on politicians? I can't tell, okay? But the media is a mystery to me. Like, they are so overwhelmingly, okay, so now to the point about from the river to the sea, Netanyahu has said that many times. He said it again in a sense today. He said it literally before, it's in their charter, and Israel has the power to actually prevent Palestine from existing and has prevented Palestine from existing. And by the way, when they are trying to create greater Israel, that includes Gaza and the West Bank and all of the Christian Holy Lands in the West Bank. And that doesn't mean, oh, the Christians get to stay. No, they will drive out the Muslims and the Christians. But yet in a giant Christian country, a majority Christian country, the only Christian outraged by it is Tucker Carlson and now Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey. But all of the other ones are quiet as a sheep. Oh yeah, if you're Israel, murder any Christian. I mean, that is insane. So to the point of greater Israel, today, Netanyahu, Times of Israel, quoting him, that he said, quoting that he's on a mission. I have a sense of a mission historically and spiritually. And he said it's a mission of generations. There are generations of Jews that dreamt of coming here and generations of Jews who will come after us. When asked specifically about greater Israel. So he's on a mission to wipe out the Palestinians, Muslim and Christian, in the West Bank and Gaza, and yes, parts of Lebanon and Syria, and take all of that for Israel, for generations to come. But is anybody even quoting the most powerful man in the region? The one who wields the biggest army and has America following him like a dog? And we're not concerned about him wiping out the Palestinians, but we keep talking about how Israel has a right to exist. Of course they exist. They're making it appear as if Israel is in peril when they're not within a million miles of existential peril. The people in existential peril are the Christians and Muslims that live in the occupied territories. So if it's not overwhelming propaganda, what is it?
Yeah, no, you make a great point. Yeah, and so I wanna go to the next clip where she discusses what it's like for Christians and Muslims to live side by side. What kind of persecution have the Muslims in the occupied territory dealt with from the Muslim community? Take a look.
The Muslims, for the most part, are they've all grown up together, the Christians and the Muslims, and there's a certain amount of commonality and respect. And so me being dressed like this was just like many of the women there, right? So they kind of respected that. There's the same sort of conservative culture. There's the same sort of idea that we're both have some same basic values. of compassion for our neighbor, of taking care of our families, and trying to live. They have their form of fasting and almsgiving, and it's actually very important to them. And I think the best parts of Islam come from its development from Christian ideas that Muhammad came to know. I'm sure of that. You can sense it.
This is a very different story from the one that we're told in the American media, that Christians are imperiled by Muslims in the Middle East.
They are not imperiled by Muslims in Palestine. That is an absolute fact.
So I'm very grateful for that portion of the conversation because, as I'm getting older, I want to learn more about my ancestors, my history. As I've mentioned on the show before, my maternal grandmother was born in Haifa because after the Armenian genocide, Armenians fled to various parts of the Middle East, and the maternal side of my family ended up in Haifa, Palestine at the time. She was born in 1937 and left in 1947 after the violence really started to get out of control ahead of the Nakba. But nonetheless, the stories that my grandmother told my mother about how the Palestinian Muslims treated Armenian refugees who were obviously overwhelmingly Christian was incredible. They were welcoming. They weren't like, ooh, who are these weird, strange people with a different religion? We don't want them here. We don't want them to come here seeking refuge. No, they were welcoming. And in fact, different parts of the Armenian diaspora, depending on where they ended up, have absorbed parts of the culture in the parts of the world that they ended up, right? So there's elements of my upbringing that I'm now realizing have been culturally influenced by Palestinians because of the fact that Palestinians welcomed a group of Armenian refugees during the Armenian genocide so they can have safety, so they can build lives for themselves. And so that story, or those stories that my grandmother told my mother, clash significantly with the narrative that you hear in American media about Muslims and the way that they treat anyone that isn't Muslim.
Yeah, so she is bold because she also talks from time to time about, well, you have to have resistance towards what Israel's doing, right? And here in America, resisting Israel is by definition terrorism. And these days, even if you verbally resist them, they say, oh, yeah, you're with Hamas, right? And they try to do all sorts of things to ruin your life, right? Guys, on Christian Zionism, she's gonna get into that a little bit. And it's not true, as we've been saying to you guys for a long time on the show, right? So meaning like it's not even in the Bible. Like they just invented something.
Yeah.
And I don't know who invented it. I mean, I know a couple of people who invented it, which is very, very curious. All of a sudden in the 1970s, a new theology comes out called Christian Zionism, where they pretend the Bible says that Israel should have the land. By the way, not even Christians, but Israel should have the land.
The Bible would totally say that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Jesus was like, okay, my followers shouldn't have this land. It should be given to the people who killed me, okay? And I don't mean that like, oh, Jews killed Jesus, whatever. The Romans did, but he came from the Jews, and the Jewish leaders did betray him. It doesn't matter. I don't even believe in religion. That's not the point. The point is, no, Jesus wouldn't have been like, yes, those guys who were down for my crucifixion should have the land and not my followers. It doesn't make any sense at all. But we're told propaganda over and over again. Muslims evil, Israel wonderful and blessed, and Christians are paramount unless they live in the occupied territories or originally Israel, in which case Christians are irrelevant. Real Christians would be against the Christians. Tell me that's not propaganda. How is that not propaganda?
Well, what I was kind of surprised by was when I had that conversation on Tucker Carlson's show, and I talked about the fact that Iran also has Armenian diaspora living within that country, openly practicing Christianity, going to church. There are churches in Iran. And I guess I just assumed that people knew, and you should never assume that people know, but Tucker seemed surprised by that. And most people in America, now that I think about it, probably don't know that. They probably think that, in Iran, you're not allowed to practice Christianity. There's also a Jewish population, by the way, in Iran as well. I'm not at all providing cover for the Ayatollah and, the religious zealots in Iran. They're vicious to the Muslim population in Iran, as we've seen in various examples that we've talked about on this show. show. But I think that it's being exaggerated, the extent to which people are persecuted in Iran because of the Ayatollah. And it's kind of manufactured in a way to justify a potential hot war with Iran, which I believe America should avoid at any and all costs. Final thing I'll get to is her comments on Christian Zionism. Take a look at that.
Someone like Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, is saying and doing what he's doing because he's following a Christianity that is not the Christianity of the Holy Land. It's not the Christianity of a Catholic or an Orthodox or a traditional Christian. It's a heretical belief.
What is Christian Zionism?
Mm-hmm. As far as I understand it, they believe in the idea of the rapture. They believe that it's sort of this cruel bargain they have going with Israel. Because basically what they say that they're going to be swooped up into heaven, right? And then there's going to be a 1,000-year kingdom. And then there'll be the end of the world and the judgment by Christ, and he'll come back. This is a false, it was condemned as a heresy in 381.
So basically what they're arguing is that Jesus coming the first time wasn't enough?
Yeah, and it's like, in a way, it's denying the Messiah.
That's fascinating. And look, obviously, I am not educated on Muslim teachings at all. So I had no idea that Muslim religion believes in Jesus as a prophet.
It's actually deeper than that. So almost nobody in America knows this. The Quran is the third book according to Muslims. So they believe in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. So again, I don't know how many times people in American media have said that. It might be zero on television.
I didn't know about
okay.
that.
And so Jesus is a very sacred prophet in Islam. So much so that when God sends his messenger back down when everyone is saved in the Quran, he does not send Muhammad. He sends Jesus back. Okay, so that's how holy and important Jesus is in Islam. How often have you heard that?
Never, literally never.
You were told that Muslims are a threat to Christians, when that's preposterous. Muslims cherish Christians. They talk about people of the book, and Jews too. Jews and Christians are people of the book, and so they are to be protected at all times. Okay, so now, does everybody live up to that? No, in every religion there are lunatics, right? Yep. So there's fundamentalists in Islam, and obviously in Judaism, where there's full raging lunatics, the settlers, who murder everyone in their path because they think God whispered in their ear to kill them and steal their land. And God's a terrible God in their interpretation, right? And there's of course Christian fundamentalists, and there's even Buddhist fundamentalists, etc. You get it. But why do you hear so many stories about the Muslim extremists? For two reasons. Number one, when there is occupation and oppression, what rises up? Do you think it's the moderates? No, it's never the moderates. Do you think it's secular people? Almost never, okay? So what rises up is extremists to fight an overwhelming power, okay? So by the way, the resistance or fighting back in any situation, good or bad, are always extremists. So that's why you'll see more stories of extremists coming out in Muslim areas like the occupied territories, because there's no infrastructure for moderation. All there is, hey, Israel says they're gonna take this land and they're gonna oppress you for the rest of the time.
They're gonna take your homes.
They're gonna do everything. Right. And the moderates are powerless. They can't ever get anything done. Israel goes, you're useless and you have no power at all, and we'll totally ignore you, right? So the only people that Israel does not ignore are the people that are trying to bomb them, etc. So those folks rise up as resistance. By the way, when that happened in France, they were called the brave French resistance against the Nazis, because they were. Did they do violence? Yes.
Yep.
Did they do the same, very similar tactics as, get ready for it, brace for impact, Hamas? Yes. And we consider them heroes. But Hamas are evil, evil terrorists. Okay, fine, they kill civilians. All we ask for is some sort of both truth and reasonable standards that you could apply to both sets of folks, right? So if Hamas is evil, dirty terrorists, even though they are fighting a disastrous, awful, oppressive occupation, okay, fine, good, we agree. Now, when Israel kills 50 times the civilians, when they'd have no need to do it, when they're an overwhelming military power and they are obliterating the civilian population of Gaza, they are obviously far worse terrorists. But on American television, you're only allowed to call Muslims terrorists. You can't ever call the Israelis terrorists, and if you do, you'll be fired and canceled and etc. So, but the resistance here in America against Israeli occupation here is fascinating. Because now, as I said earlier, Tucker, Dave Smith, us, and some of you have written in, Amy Goodman, and many others.
Lots of people, yeah.
Yes, Democracy Now! Has been great. A lot of shows have been great. But it's those top three, top or not, right? That's not my point. Is interestingly, somebody from a Muslim background, a Jewish background, Dave Smith, and a Christian background, Tucker Carlson. See, that's the beauty of America. Muslims, Christians, and Jews getting together and fighting for justice. But the people who are fighting against us are unfortunately have a lot more power. They have, almost complete control of the media in a way that is inexplicable to me. And so what's the pushback against Tucker for this?
So, I saw stuff online, like on X, for instance. I didn't prepare it for the segment because why waste time on it? Like insurrectionist Barbie was outraged by it. I noticed that the Babylon Bee, kind of made fun of the interview with this headline. Tucker Carlson releases exclusive interview with dredged up corpse of Osama bin Laden. Basically kind of like making a reference to, he's interviewing.
They're trying to make fun of Muslims, but she's Christian. She's a nun.
No, I know. I think the point here is.
The point is dirty Middle Easterner doesn't look like us. Bow your head to Israel.
I mean, he's interviewing people who are perpetuating anti-Semitism. I think that's the point that they're trying to make here, right? But
ironically, as they do an anti-Christian, anti-Middle Eastern tweet, everyone that looks like they're from the Middle East is Osama bin Laden, but you're the racist? No, you're the racist for doing that headline.
I'm glad he interviewed her. I learned a lot because that was, again, a perspective I hadn't really known about, heard about. I knew that Christians were being persecuted to some extent. I thought it was limited to like a few unhinged, settlers who would spit on them, which was disgusting enough. But she gave me a deeper understanding of what it's like. And the fact that there's a dwindling population of Christians in the occupied territory, that reality now makes a lot more sense to me. Why that's happening makes a lot more sense to me. And for anyone who thinks that this, is just a conflict between unhinged, evil Palestinian Muslims and these angelic, Jewish Israelis you're wrong. You're wrong. It's way deeper than that. It's not just about religion. This is about power. This is about land. And you hear it in the statements that are being made by members of the Israeli government on a regular basis. Period.
Okay, last thing is, I'm worried about both of them. They both Tucker Carlson and Mother Stephanopoulos there, the nun we're referring to. One Deb Long, a member, wrote on Super Chat, I'm now worried for her safety. That's unfortunately a really good point. Because anyone who gets the word out about what's happening in the occupied territories is murdered by Israel. They just murdered 5 journalists yesterday, actually 6, and including one of the most prominent journalists. They have murdered an American journalist with a sniper shot from 200 yards away. So they are murderers and serial killers in the Israeli government. So her life is now in danger and she knows that, but she got the word out anyway about Christians suffering under Israeli rule in the occupied territories. And then in terms of Tucker, I don't know that he's in any danger, but I do know this. He's not just taking on Israel now, which is already a giant undertaking, and they will come to ruin your life. There's no question. Anybody who's taken on Israel knows. Like this idea that, no, it's just nothing. There's no buddy who's trying to ruin people's lives. No. The minute you criticize Israel, if you're a prominent person in media or politics, there is an army of people who will dedicate their lives to making sure that your career is ruined, okay? So don't tell me they don't exist because we all see them, we all see their actions. So if you're saying they don't exist, you're a liar, and it's weird how you're lying for them on purpose. But Tucker didn't just stop there, he took on Christian Zionists.
Yeah.
That is a giant percentage of the country. And by the way, somebody wrote in, he's just trying to win over the Christian base. If all you cared was about political outcomes, and the electoral success, and you were thinking of running as a Republican, the very last people you would take on is Christian Zionists.
100%.
Because they're a giant voting bloc, they're very significant, and they usually don't break, right? And when their moronic, evil leaders tell them, bow your head to Israel, they all bow their heads to Israel, right? So now Tucker's saying, don't bow your head to Israel. And so he's invoking the wrath of those Christian Zionist leaders, and that is brave.
It's the most intense, traumatic experience I don't think any physician can understand. I would say take the most experienced trauma surgeon, in Baltimore, which is like one of the biggest trauma centers in America, and put him in Gaza, and it's like child's play compared to what's going on in Gaza. You're talking about like an influx of like 400 patients in like 4 hours with 30 casualties on arrival, 30 headshots on arrival, 30 critical mass shots on arrival, and then like everything in between, women, children, elderly, men, young boys. And it's just like, how the heck do you triage all this? And that was every day, man.
This week, Theo Von interviewed Dr. Aziz Rahman, who is actually a doctor from Wisconsin, who decided to volunteer, risk his life, and go on this 2-week mission to Gaza in order to provide medical aid to the Palestinian people. And he witnessed some pretty devastating events that I think is important to hear about, especially now that Israel has made a point to slaughter as many journalists on the ground as possible to cover up its war crimes. Now, he was stationed at Nasser Hospital, which actually happens to be the last functioning hospital in Gaza. And he's an interventional radiologist. I had no idea what that was until I listened to this conversation. And as he explains it, interventional radiologists use image guidance to perform minimally invasive procedures. Okay, so the interview lasted for almost 2 hours. It was fascinating. I highly recommend you listen to it if you can. We'll include a link in the description box. So in the interest of time though, we're going to show you some highlights. I wish I could talk about the whole conversation because it was so incredible. First, we should warn you though, his stories are pretty graphic, just horrific, hard to hear or listen to, I should say. And early on in the interview, he explained the sheer volume of patients who were injured or killed at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, those aid sites that have been referred to as essentially death traps. So let's take a look at what he had to say about it.
The first day we got there was actually pretty chill, the Friday. But then the Saturday, they had the MCI, it's called a mass casualty incident. And they basically pull a fire alarm. I was like, what the hell is that? They're like, oh, every doctor come down to the ER to try to help. And so I was like, okay. So went downstairs, got in there. It's just like brain matter coming out of people. There's guts coming out of people's abdomens. There's people's legs blown off and someone's carrying it in next to the, one of the family members bringing it in for the doctors. And, they think you can just reattach it. That's when reality hit. And I was like, okay, this must be like a one-off. And it just kept happening every day, and sometimes multiple times a day. And essentially, basically, we found the pattern related to when the GHF sites were opening up.
So it gets worse, believe it or not. But before we get to more of what he has to say, I want to just kind of take a quick detour to discuss Theo Von as the person who hosts this podcast, the person who is hosting this guest, this American doctor who went to Gaza on his podcast. I can tell by listening to the full episode that he's been attacked for daring to speak out against the genocide in Gaza. I don't know if he's ever gonna hear this or watch this, but I just wanna let him know, you are in the right. Like Theo Von he's a normal person, he's not a political person, right? But he sees what's happening in Gaza and he recognizes how wrong it is, because he's a human being who values human life. Much like Americans, myself included, were horrified at the atrocities committed against civilians in Israel on October 7th. When you see similar or worse atrocities being committed against the Palestinian people, obviously you're also going to be horrified by it, disgusted by it. You're gonna wanna speak out against it. And Theo Von, since he's not a political person, I can tell he has like this lack of confidence in speaking out, but he speaks out to the best of his ability. And he's inviting experts, he's inviting this doctor on to provide a voice for the Palestinian people, to provide a perspective on what's going on the ground in Gaza. And for that, he deserves, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of respect. So I thank him for speaking out, and I thank him for having this doctor on. And more importantly, I really do value these American doctors who are risking their lives to provide medical aid in Gaza. It is so selfless and it's so wonderful, and it makes me, when I think about being proud to be American, I don't think about our government, to be honest with you. I think about our people. And I think that Dr. Aziz Rahman represents the best of us. So with that in mind, he explains that some of Gazans feel so broken, so depressed, that they intentionally go to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid sites knowing what is likely to happen. So take a look.
You know, in Islam, suicide is forbidden, right? But the situation there where almost everyone is depressed is that some people who have lost everything, their families, their kids, almost want to die. So they'll go to GHF, kind of hoping they'll die.
Going to these food lines and these.
They're just hoping they get shot because the statistics are there. Like, you know, you're seeing 100 dead every day and like 300 injured every day. Like it's almost consistent for the last month or two.
That's really depressing. And honestly, of course, there are Palestinians who are so desperate for food that they'll risk getting shot. Like they don't want to die, they'll risk getting shot by going to these GHF aid hubs. But to know that they expect to get shot at, and some of them just, they can't take it anymore and want to die, but don't want to take their own lives because of their religion and what their religion entails, is just so utterly devastating. And again, brings me a lot of shame as an American that our government is aiding and abetting what Israel is doing right now. Now, he didn't just see patients from these GHF sites, coming into the hospitals. So here's his story of a little girl with a very suspicious injury. Take a look.
Well, I asked this one girl, like, what were you doing through the family? Because I don't speak Arabic, so we were using translators. And she's like, oh, I was just sitting in my tent reading the Quran, which is like the holy book, like reading the Bible, right? And this quadcopter just shot through the tent, and here I am, And there's some weirdness going on when a bullet goes from up to down, like people usually get shot from forward to back, right?
Yeah.
From up to down, and sitting in a tent is very strange. So, there's some people who are suspicious about quadcopters shooting middle of tents, which is in the green zone, the safe zone where civilians live. But it's almost every day we are hearing of civilians, girls, boys being shot by quadcopters.
Yeah, I'm personally not gonna beat around the bush at all. Why would I do that at this point? Yeah, the IDF is intentionally slaughtering people, including children. Like why? I mean, look, I have utmost respect for Dr. Rahman, but for all intents and purposes, they are intentionally killing people. I mean, the ship of giving Israel the benefit of the doubt has sailed long time ago. So for me, no, that gunshot wound isn't suspicious. That gunshot wound represents the intentional slaughter of the Palestinian people, including literal children. So I want to end on a little bit of hopium here, because the doctor told many, other very heavy stories that unfortunately we don't have the time to delve into, but it is worth watching him explain what made him want to risk his life to provide medical aid in Gaza. Take a look.
Myself coming home from work, after a good day's work, but just unhappy. I was just like, man, like there's kids dying out there, I'm taking care of these adults, with alcoholic cirrhosis, they made these decisions to their liver, for example.
Yeah.
But these kids, they are innocent, right? And then I come home and see my children running up to me, asking me to play video games with them, watch TV, have some snacks. I'm saying this dichotomy is so hard to like reconcile. And so when I got this invitation, it was almost like this opportunity to like decompress, if that makes any sense, in the war zone. And it's weird, right? It's like a paradox. Like, why the hell would you decompress in a war zone? But I almost needed to do something with my hands. I actually wrote some letters to my kids before I left. I was like, I don't know if I'm coming back. I had the hope I would come back. But,
yeah.
Anything could have happened.
You've got an amazing wife and an amazing family. Honestly, I want to believe that if I were married to a doctor, I would be okay with him risking his life to do what Dr. Rahman did. I mean, they've got children, you know. I don't know. I just think it takes an incredibly strong person to do this. And you know, a lot of the doctors who go to Gaza are in fact married, do have children, and they risk their lives anyway because they genuinely believe in providing medical aid to these people who are being, you know, persecuted, slaughtered, maimed by the IDF. And to me, that demonstrates not just kindness, but like this human spirit that I really, really value among the doctors, of course, but also the family members who give them their blessings to go do what they did, to do what Dr. Rahman did. So I love his wife, and I'm just so grateful. Like, these are Americans. Like, these are the Americans that make me freaking proud to be an American. I'm gonna skip ahead to the very last video here because he did explain how the Gazans wanted him to help after he left the territory. So let's take a look at what they had to say.
I asked many people before I left, I was like, what do you want me to do? You know, and everyone basically says like, don't stop talking. Like, just speak about us as much as you can. And then the other thing, which I found really humbling, was tell people that we are humans. Like, that's the little demand that they expect of the world. You'd be surprised if you went to Gaza and you told people, hey, I spoke up, you are better than the rest of humanity to them. That's all they want. They just want you to speak up. They're not expecting you and I to save the day. They're not expecting you and I to get rid of the bombs and the drones and the tanks. They just want us to be a voice, like you said before, and try to convince who we can, whether it be our family, our friends, that these people are human. They're not all Hamas, okay? And they deserve to live. You know, they deserve to be educated. They deserve to have fun, smile, to see their kids grow up.
In America, we don't really have much of a choice in regard to making political decisions or voting for politicians who are gonna do the right thing. Both parties are completely captured by the Israel lobby. And so as American citizens who sometimes feel incredibly powerless when it comes to situations like this, it's good to know that there's at least something we can do. And so if you're bothered by what's going on and you've felt uncomfortable speaking out, well, I mean, you can take your power back by speaking out. And that's one of the things that Theo has done, even though he doesn't feel confident doing it. And that's why he has my respect. And I get it, it's risky. I mean, I've dealt with the threats. I've dealt with all sorts of really, really scary situations lately because of the fact that I've been speaking out. So I'm not going to, you know, look down at people who just don't want to, they feel uncomfortable to. But if you do want to take your power back, if you do want to do something, please speak out. And I know it's random to mention her, but I can't help it. Shout out to Miss Rachel, because she is such a badass, considering how she's become a target of the Israelis and she still speaks out anyway. That woman is an American hero, another person that makes me proud to be an American. So we're gonna do what we can here at TYT. We're gonna continue shedding light on these stories and the plight of the Palestinian people. And thank you to everyone who's been supportive of that effort.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.